The Checkpoint is presented by FARA, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. FARA, to serve those who need it most.
Geostat has released preliminary data on Georgia's foreign trade, showing that in the past months, the country's exports increased by 87 million year-on-year, reaching $701 million in total. During the first 9 months of 2025, exports amounted to $5.15 billion, marking 7.7% annual increase. As for imports, goods worth $1.44 billion entered Georgia in September, a slight 4 million decrease compared to the same period last year. Overall, imports for the first 9 months of 2025 amounted to $13.4 billion, which is around 10% higher year-on-year. In September 2025, total remittances to Georgia reached $318 million, which is a 12.1% increase compared to the same months of the previous year. In monetary terms, this represents $34.4 million annual gross. Ministry of Finance has published public debt statistics as of September 2025, according to which Georgia's external debt increased by $178 million over the previous months, reaching $9.27 billion. The report attributes the rise mainly to an increase in credits owed to the World Bank, which grew by $115.8 million to $2.3 billion. On September 15, the United Kingdom imposed financial sanctions on Russian energy giant Lukoil. The sanctions document specifies that restrictions apply to the company, with a few exceptions, including Lukoil's share in the Shah Deniz pipeline project and South Gas Corridor Company and Tengizchevroil. Georgian agency BMG contacted Lukoil's Georgian office to clarify whether the sanctions would apply locally as well. The company's response will be shared once received. Speaking of sanctions, searches were carried out at the residences of Irakli Garibashvili, Grigol Liluashvili, Otar Partshaladze and other government former officials. As a result, $7 million and 136,000 Georgian lari were seized. The State Security Service disclosed information about the searches, which covered 24 apartments and houses linked to former high-ranking officials and their associates. Authorities are currently examining seized documentation and electronic devices to determine the origin of the cash. Based on the findings, further investigative and legal actions will follow. Irakli Kobakhidze presented the new education reform concept, which introduces significant changes to Georgia's school and higher education systems. Under the reform, undergraduate programs will generally last 3 years, while master's program will last 1 year. Meanwhile, the school system will revert to 11 years of education.
This is The Checkpoint. I'm Elene, Kvanchilashvili, author and the host of the show, and the Checkpoint's team is ready to sum up Business and Economics Week for you. On October 14, 2025, the Strasbourg court delivered its judgment on compensation in the case of Georgia versus Russia concerning the so-called ongoing occupation. According to information released by Georgia's Ministry of Justice, the ruling obliges Russia to pay over 253 million euros in compensation to Georgia. The court endorsed the comprehensive legal position and evidence presented by the Georgian government, and as a result has ordered the Russian Federation to pay 253 million euros for the benefit of more than 29,000 victims, Georgian citizens. As is publicly known, on April 9, 2024, a judgment was delivered in this case, holding Russia fully responsible for the practice of mass intimidation, detention, attacks, killings, and official tolerance of such acts against Georgia's population in the occupied territories and along the occupation line. Abuses occurred appearing against the backdrop of Georgia's territorial occupation and so-called borderization. Today's judgment represents the logical continuation of historic cases won against Russia in Georgia versus Russia, the so-called deportees case concerning the mass expulsion of Georgians from Russia. The Strasbourg court ordered the Russian Federation to pay up to 10 million euros for the mass deportation of ethnic Georgians and gross violations of their human rights. The public is also familiar with the judgment in Georgia versus Russia, the so-called August 2008 war case, which obliged the Russian Federation to pay up to 130 million euros for mass violations committed against Georgian citizens during and after the August War. Although the Russian Federation is no longer a member of the Council of Europe, it remains legally obliged to comply with court judgments, with fines accruing for each day of non-compliance. Work on executing these judgments continues within the framework of the Council of Europe's Committee of Ministers. With Georgia's active involvement, Georgia's Ministry of Justice extends its gratitude to the state agencies involved in gathering evidence and congratulates all of Georgia on this historic victory, states the Ministry of Justice's statement. Russia already stated that they are not going to pay this amount to Georgia's Interior Ministry has fined Finnish Foreign Minister and current OSCE Chairperson-in-Office Elene Valtonen 5,000 lari, about $1,800, for blocking the road during a protest rally she attended on Tbilisi's Rustaveli Avenue on October 14, while the Foreign Ministry has sent a protest note to the OSCE regarding the incident and Valtonen's statement. The Interior Ministry confirmed that on October 16 that it had fined Finnish Minister Elene Valtonen, who in her capacity as OSCE chair during her recent visit to Georgia appeared at a routine anti-government and pro-EU rally on Tbilisi's central Rustaveli Avenue near Parliament and expressed support for peaceful protesters who have been blocking the street to traffic nightly for more than 320 days. Meanwhile, Georgia's Foreign Ministry sent a note of protest to the OSCE Secretariat and participating states over Valtonen's presence at the rally and her statement supporting peaceful protesters, saying her actions were incompatible with the universally recognized principles of international law. The Foreign Ministry said in its protest note that Finnish Foreign Minister and OSCE Chair Elene Valtonen went beyond her official program during the visit when she joined on October 14 a street rally organized by a small group of anti-government activists who were freely but illegally blocking Tbilisi's main avenue. The ministry further claimed that Valtonen's actions are incompatible with the universally recognized principles of international law, including respect for sovereignty and non-interference in internal affairs, as reflecting in the Helsinki Final Act, the UN resolution and the OSCE rules and procedures, and they run counter to the spirit of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. On October 14, Elena Valtonen appeared at the protest site near Parliament, met with demonstrators, recorded a video from the blocked Rustaveli Avenue.
I'm in Tbilisi in front of the Parliament building. There's a peaceful demonstration gathering here slowly. A lot of people coming here waving their flags of the European Union, of NATO, apparently also the Finnish flag, but most importantly the Georgian flag. The reason is that these people are concerned about the direction that this country has been taking away the basic liberties of people, starting with the freedom of expression and the freedom of assembly. Needless to say, these people deserve all of these rights, and we are here to support them.
During her stay in Georgia, Valtonen met with Georgian Dream Foreign Minister Kvanchilashvili as well as the civil society representatives and visited the occupation line. The planned meeting with the Prime Minister Kutaisi, however, was cancelled, while the Georgian government claimed that Kutaisi cancelled the meeting because the Finnish Foreign Minister attended an illegal rally and made false statements. Valtonen told the media it was the Finnish side, not Georgian, that cancelled the meeting, first due to a schedule change before the announcement of the fine for blocking the road and the protest note. Elene Valtonen earlier in the afternoon on October 16 addressed Kobakidze in a post on X, inviting him to Finland to observe any demonstration of his choosing. The number of citizens receiving subsistence allowance in Georgia continues to grow. According to data from the Social Service Agency, the number of beneficiaries reached 709,148 in September. Among them, over 245,000 individuals are participants in the state program designed to promote public employment. Compared to August, the total number of recipients increased by approximately 400, while more than 71 million lira was allocated for subsistence payments last month. Under the terms of the Public Employment Promotion Program, socially vulnerable persons who are informally employed can maintain their subsistence allowance for 4 years if at least one family member participates in the initiative. Families meeting these criteria retain their registration in the Unified Database of Socially Vulnerable Families, ensuring uninterrupted support and allowance payments during the program's duration. The program aims to integrate socially vulnerable groups into the labor market while maintaining a social safety net. This approach not only provides immediate financial support but also encourages legal employment, helping individuals secure more stable income sources over time. Since the launch of the program through 2024, a total of 39,707 socially vulnerable individuals have been employed. Of these, almost 33,000 people have officially legalized their employment status, marking a significant step toward reducing informal labor and enhancing economic stability for vulnerable families. What was new in the economy this week? Here's our weekly wrap-up.
A new draft law proposes banning convicted individuals from leaving Georgia until they fully compensate victims for damages. The amendments are part of the law on the rules for the exit and entry of citizens from Georgia. Under the current law, citizens might already be restricted from traveling abroad if a court order prohibits it. The new proposal expands this by requiring proof such as a notarized document confirming full payment or settlement of compensation to the victim. If the victim refuses compensation under the lawful procedure, this will also be taken into account. The bill also introduces similar conditions for refusing immigration permits or passport for temporary departure if compensation obligations remain unpaid, in line with the law on enforcement proceedings. According to the preliminary note, the goal is to create an effective legal tool preventing offenders from evading responsibility and ensuring that victims receive full compensation before the convict can leave the country. Everyone has the right to express protest within the law, but if your representation is insufficient, you must respect the interests of the majority, said Georgian Dream Prime Minister Ilakli Kobakidze. According to Kobakidze, current enforcement measures have proven ineffective, which is why amendments to the administrative offences and criminal codes are being prepared. Our legislation, consistent with international standards, stipulates that if the number of protesters is insufficient to block a street, they must respect others' rights and refrain from obstructing public pathway. Fines have existed, but we are not entirely effective. Therefore, amendments are being introduced to ensure that largest minority does not oppress the majority, a core democratic principle, he said. The upcoming legislative changes will define new regulations for holding demonstrations and protests under both administrative and criminal law. During the annual meeting of International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, Minister of Finance Lasha Kutaisi and President of National Bank of Georgia Natia Turnava held a meeting with Antonella Bassini, Vice President of the World Bank for Europe and Central Asia. According to the Ministry of Finance, the discussions center on ongoing and planned projects supported by the World Bank across both public and private sectors. These encompass initiatives focused on developing road infrastructure, boosting connectivity security and strengthening human capital, among other areas. The Minister of Finance briefed the Vice President on Georgia's current macroeconomic situation and medium-term forecast. Notably, the World Bank recently revised Georgia's economic growth outlook upward to 7%, the ministry stated. The Vice President of the Bank highlighted the significance of ongoing cooperation with Georgia and expressed optimism that the supported projects will foster sustainable development within the country's economy. Ronald Price, Regional Director of World Bank for the South Caucasus, Ekaterina Guntzadze, Deputy Minister of Finance, Vakhtang Tsignadze, Deputy Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development, and Tamar Taliashvili, Georgia's ambassador to the United States, attended the meeting, the ministry added. Natia Turnava, President of National Bank of Georgia, has highlighted growing international interest in the country from investors. Speaking during the annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank in Washington, Turnava noted that some investors who were previously considering Georgia have already transitioned into active participants into the market. Turnava, who is attending the meeting with the Georgian delegation, described the platform as an important opportunity to engage with global financial leaders. This is a regular forum for central bankers, finance ministers and government representatives to discuss ongoing projects, cooperation, future prospects and hold bilateral meetings with other colleagues, she said. She emphasized that Georgia's appeal lies in its macroeconomic stability and consistent growth. This is gratifying that every year interest in Georgia is increasing. Even more encouraging is that investors who previously participated in similar meetings have now moved from potential investors to real investors, confirming that Georgia is a profitable and safe place for investment, Turnava explained. External merchandise trade of Georgia amounted to 18.5 billion in January-September 2025, 9.1% higher year-on-year, according to the preliminary data from the National Statistics Office of Georgia. The value of export increased by 7.7%, reaching $5.15 billion, while the imports increased by 9.7%, amounting to $13.4 billion. The trade deficit equal to $8.2 billion and its share in trade turnover constituted 44.4%. Georgia has seen a record-breaking tourist boom in 2025, welcoming over 4.3 million international tourists in the first 9 months of the year, according to the Ministry of Economy. Minister Mariam Kvanchilashvili credited the growth to the peace, stability and the right policy direction. Compared to the same period last year, international tourist numbers rose by 7.9%, international visitors by 5.6%, and total international travels by 5.4%, reaching 6.1 million. Kvanchilashvili highlighted that government policies and marketing efforts, particularly in expanding direct flights and attracting new airlines, have played a major role. New routes from markets such as France, Germany, China and Gulf states and Israel have significantly boosted tourist flows, she said. The minister added that this momentum is expected to continue through 2025, bringing increased tourist revenues, stronger local businesses and more employment opportunities.
The International Monetary Fund has not changed its position and will consider launching a new program with the Georgian Dream government only if the government itself formally requests one. This information was confirmed to Analytics in a brief response from Andrew Jewell, the IMF's resident representative in Georgia. Requesting a program would require the government to present a detailed outline of its readiness to implement a reform agenda, followed by the IMF monitoring and evaluation of the reform process. The continuation of the IMF program depends on whether the reviews of these reforms are deemed completed. While the program also includes financial support, its mere existence can be even more important for investor confidence, serving as a sign of fiscal discipline and sound macroeconomic management. Georgia last had such a program with the IMF, denominated in SDRs, but it did not draw on the approved credits. Still, the program significantly strengthened Georgia's Georgia's reputation for fiscal prudence on the international stage. In 2023, the program, initially scheduled to run until June 2025, was first suspended and then allowed to expire without renewal. The reasons were serious concerns over the independence of the National Bank of Georgia and the government's failure to fulfill key reforms, particularly the corporatization of state-owned enterprises. The IMF had urged the government to dismantle the quasi-economic nature of these enterprises and to end their use for electoral or political purposes. 2 years after the program's suspension and expiration, which also ended IMF monitoring on the reforms, GD Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze proactively reintroduced the SOE reform agenda, claiming that the reforms had already saved 700 million lari. According to Kobakidze, this saving resulted solely from personal optimization. However, many analysts question this explanation, arguing that such a large amount likely reflects years of wasteful spending of state resources and that those responsible should be identified and held accountable. They also suspect that corruption and dishonest practices in procurement and tenders may have contributed to these inefficiencies. The Georgian Dream government, however, appears uninterested in exploring the deeper causes behind the claimed 700 million lari in savings. Amid this backdrop, Analytics with me, Elene, Kvanchilashvili, recently drew attention to a government press release stating that the head of the government administration, Levan Georgioliani, met with the IMF's resident representative, Andrew Jewell. According to the release, the meeting discussed cooperation between Georgia and the IMF as well as the SOE reform. Georgioliani emphasized that optimization processes had begun in the energy sector at Georgian railways, resulting in savings of several tens of millions of lari. The meeting also focused on the main directions of the government efficiency department's work, the regulation of procurement issues in state enterprises, and the steps taken by the government in this regard, the administration statement said. As has become common practice for Georgian governmental bodies, the official press release did not include any comments from the other side, in this case the IMF. Consequently, Analytics reached out to the IMF's resident representative for clarification and an interview request. Noticeable trend has emerged. Not only the IMF, but the international financial institutions in general, traditionally known for their high social responsibility and openness to public questions, are now increasingly choosing to remain silent or issue only brief written replies. This shift appears to parallel Georgian Dream's growing tensions with the West and the corresponding decline in the party's international legitimacy. After Andrew Jewell's meeting with Levan Georgioliani, Analytics with me sent him two questions. What was discussed at the meeting? Was there any talk of launching a new program with the IMF, and what were the topics that have been covered? And what was discussed regarding SOE reform? And does the IMF believe that the Georgian government has begun implementing reforms according to its recommendations? Jewell did not answer the second question. Regarding the first, he replied with just 2 sentences. The authorities have not requested a new program. Our normal dialogue with the authorities continues, including through technical assistance in various areas. As in 2023, when the program was suspended, the meaning of normal dialogue remains unclear. This phrase is particularly ambiguous given that the IMF had previously accused the same ruling party with largely the same government of breaching its commitments under the program, including taking unilateral decisions about the National Bank without prior consultation with the IMF. The IMF continues to conduct Article 4 consultations with every member country, including Georgia, regardless of whether it has a separate individual program. However, these consultations are limited to assessing macroeconomic stability, have only advisory significance, and unlike formal IMF programs, cannot be suspended or terminated if a government fails to implement recommendations. On 24-25 October, the European Union will celebrate Europe Day in Kutaisi, one of the oldest cities in Europe, a city that the ambassador calls the city of knowledge, progress, democratic values, and civic energy. Here's his call for the day.
On 24th and 25th October, we celebrate Europe Day in Kutaisi, one of the oldest cities in Europe, a city of knowledge, progress, democratic values, and civic energy. Kutaisi has given Georgia some of its brightest voices and strongest hearts. Its schools shaped intellectuals, visionaries, and politicians who designed Georgia's path to independence. It is also a city that connects Georgia with the world. Kutaisi and Imereti are famous for their incredible hospitality, traditions, and culture. Kutaisi is a natural place to celebrate Europe Day. Come and discover the work of EU member states. Learn what EU-funded projects bring to Georgian citizens. See and experience more than 30 years of friendship and partnership between the European Union and Georgia. Join us for 2 days of music, art, education, fairs and exhibitions. And please bring the vibrant Imereti energy with you. Let's make Europe Day in Kutaisi an unforgettable event. Gelodebit Ertat Gavatarot Evropis 3, Kutaisi.
Georgia recorded a record number of international tourist visits in the first 9 months of 2025, according to data published by the National Tourism Administration. From January to September, the country welcomed over 4 million international tourists, representing around 8% increase compared to the same period last year. In total, more than 6 million international travelers visited Georgia during the 9-month period, marking a 5% year-on-year rise. The growth highlights Georgia's continued recovery and expansion in the tourism sector, which remains one of the country's key economic drivers. The third quarter of 2025, July-September, proved especially strong, with 2.96 million international travelers arriving in the country, a 6.6% annual increase. Of these, over 2 million were tourists, showing a 9% rise compared to the same quarter in 2024. For comparison, Galten Taggart recently reported that tourism revenues in September 2025 remained stable at $470 million, with total annual revenues projected to reach $4.5 billion, around 100 million more than in 2024. The Venice Commission, an expert body of the Council of Europe on constitutional law matters, published an opinion criticizing Georgia's recently adopted laws cracking down on foreign funding for media and civil society organizations, calling for the repeal and/or revision of controversial provisions. The 24-page document, published on October 15 and prepared at the request of the Monitoring Committee of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, reviewed the Georgian version of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, as well as recent amendments to the law on grants, the law on broadcasting, and the law on political associations. All four were passed during the spring session in the one-party parliament. The Commission called to repeal Georgian FARA and the foreign funding ban for broadcasters, while recommending the repeal or at least thorough revision of the amendments to the grants law, requiring foreign donors to seek government consent before allocating local grants. The document, on the other hand, said that the bans on in-kind foreign support for political parties fall within the permissible national margin of discretion. It also noted that the Anti-Corruption Bureau, which has been entrusted with implementing several of these laws, lacks sufficient safeguards for independence and political neutrality. The official press release said the Commission has analyzed the series of legislative acts through a systemic approach to take into account the combined effect of simultaneously applicable laws on the same entities and individuals. The Commission noted that where existing provisions of domestic legislation have proved to be insufficient to achieve a legitimate aim, the authorities should seek to amend and improve them rather than adopting new laws. In this opinion, the Venice Commission expressed regret that Georgian authorities have not wished to engage with it in the preparation of this opinion. It said the Commission remains at their disposal for pursuing their concerns in a manner which is in line with international standards. Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, according to the opinion, the legal regime imposed by Georgian FARA, which took effect in spring and which Georgian Dream claims to have copied from the US legislation, risks undermining the rule of law, civic space and democratic freedoms. Together with the law on transparency of foreign influence adopted last year, it generates further confusion and uncertainty, the body says, calling for the repeal of the controversial law. The combination of vague provisions, sweeping powers, and insufficient safeguards creates risks of arbitrariness, selective justice, and political misuse, the document reads. The document further argues that Georgian FARA provides sweeping and imprecise definitions of key terms, most notably foreign principal, agent of a foreign principal, and political activities. The lack of clarity and precision undermines foreseeability and legal certainty. It notes that the law's far-reaching scope enables its indiscriminate application to an extensive range of persons and organizations, irrespective of the existence of any actual agency relationship with a foreign actor, in a manner that appears neither necessary nor proportionate. The Commission brushed aside the claims voiced by the Georgian officials that the law conforms to democratic principles because it is an exact copy of the US law, but by arguing what matters is not only the statutory text but also the underlying legal principles, the relevant case law, and the institutional framework within which the statute operates. For this reason, the Commission notes that the authorities' reliance on the US FARA as an exact analog cannot in itself support the compatibility of GeoFARA with international standards. The Venice Commission also criticized the agents of foreign principles label as inherently stigmatizing, producing a chilling effect on freedom of expression and association. According to the opinion, obligations imposed by law on agents of foreign principle contain wide and open-ended formulations and constitute an intrusive and disproportionate burden for the discouraging civic engagement. The document further states that the Anti-Corruption Bureau, tasked with enforcing the law, is entrusted with excessive discretion despite lacking sufficient guarantees of independence and political neutrality. The Venice Commission said that in the case of FARA, which foresees criminal liability, the broadly framed provisions describing the offense permit loose interpretation and lack the requisite foreseeability and justification, while the severe sanctions fail to meet the standard of proportionality. Amendments to the loan grants, in the opinion, the Venice Commission also criticized the controversial amendments to the loan grants, which took effect in April and require foreign donors to seek the government's consent prior to disbursing grants to local organizations. According to the document, while amendments introduced the government approval required, it lacks a demonstrated justification in terms of necessity and proportionality and provide no clear and objective criteria for refusal and contain insufficient safeguards, thereby leaving wide scope for arbitrary or discriminatory application. The opinion criticizes the extensive investigatory and enforcement powers of the Anti-Corruption Bureau, including the power to order immediate seizure combined with constrained procedural timelines and disproportionate sanctions, saying such powers further undermine fairness and due process. Venice Commission recommends repealing the amendments or, at the very least, to thoroughly revise them to ensure that any restrictions are necessary, proportionate, and clearly defined, and that they are accompanied by robust procedural and judicial safeguards. Amendments to the law on broadcasting. The document also reviewed amendments to the law on broadcasting similarly passed by the Georgian Dream one-party parliament this spring, and introducing, among others, bans on foreign funding for radio and TV channels. According to the Venice Commission, the blanket ban, using an overly broad definition of foreign power, fails to distinguish between funding that genuinely threatens democratic integrity and funding that supports legitimate journalistic and civic activities and does not consider less intrusive alternatives. The opinion recommends repealing the ban on foreign funding for broadcasters, saying it undermines media pluralism and fails the standards of necessity and proportionality. And on law on the political association of citizens, finally, the Venice Commission comments on spring amendments to the law on political association of citizens, which prohibits political parties from receiving in-kind support for holding lectures, seminars, and other public events. According to the document, banning political parties from receiving such support from legal entities or associations in Georgia or abroad is part of broader restrictions on foreign funding. The Commission, however, argued that since political parties play a central role in governance, such measures fall within the permissible national margin of discretion. And finally, on the recommendations, the Venice Commission issued 6 recommendations for further elaboration of legislation in this field, recommending to avoid multiple laws that apply in parallel, to provide precise definitions and limit the discretion of the enforcement authorities, to avoid the stigmatizing term agent of the foreign principle or similar, to limit obligations to those strictly necessary and proportionate to legitimate aims, to ensure the sanctions are precise and proportionate with safeguards against abuse, and to introduce procedural safeguards, including independent enforcement bodies. Finally, the Venice Commission called on Georgia to adopt in future lawmaking an appropriately inclusive approach to ensure its legitimacy and broad accessibility. High time to turn to business and its performance this week. Natia Taktakishvili is ready to sum up this week's business news and outlook for you.
Georgia's fitness service market has doubled since the pandemic due to the growing interest in health and wellness. However, industry representatives say that high taxes and operating costs are making fitness less accessible to the wider population. They urge that, following the example of Western countries, Georgia should offer tax breaks to fitness businesses and reduce future healthcare expenses. According to Giorgi Asatiani, founder of Octopus Fitness Club, only about 2% of Georgians go to the gym regularly, several times lower than the European average. He notes that while the pandemic increased awareness of physical and mental well-being, the industry's growth is limited by heavy tax burdens, rising rents, and high utility bills. In Europe, sports and wellness centers often enjoy VAT exemptions and other benefits, but Georgia offers no such support, which directly drives up consumer prices. Prices in our market are expensive because our operational costs are high, as Asatiani explained, both in Tbilisi and Batumi. We are seeing a rise in expat clients who are particularly interested in fitness and wellness. Octopus Fitness Club plans to celebrate its 10th anniversary next year with a major expansion, opening a 2,500 square meter fitness and wellness center in Biography Complex, featuring a 25-meter pool, modern spa, and innovative health services. Despite the sector's steady development, fitness participation in Georgia remains low. Industry leaders hope that alongside new projects and growing awareness, the government will consider policies that promote a healthier lifestyle. As Asatiani emphasized, greater support for fitness sector could have a long-term positive impact both on public health and economy. Maron Pastry Shop, which also operates under the brand DW Cakes, has opened its 5th branch in Tbilisi. The new location on Mitsubishi Street marks the pastry chain's 2nd branch in Saburtalo district, with an overall investment of $200,000 USD. According to the founder, pastry chef David Gorgoshidze, he told BMDG that Maron Pastry plans to continue expanding within the Tbilisi, while the openings in other cities are not currently being considered. We want to expand in Tbilisi, not in other cities. The main challenge is finding a separate building that can accommodate both the cafe and production area, he said. Following the opening of new branch, the company's staff increased to 180 employees, reflecting growing demand for its products. According to Gorgoshidze, Maron Pastry has seen 20% growth compared to the last year, driven by improved management and quality control. Both our modern Maron line and the classic DW cake products are showing growth. The share of Maron in sales is increasing, and we have refined the brand further by importing all raw materials directly from Italy, Gorgoshidze explained. Despite the rise of Maron's contemporary offerings, the pastry chef believes that the classic cake line remains strong due to the consumer habits. Founded in 2008, the Maron Pastry brand operates 5 locations across Tbilisi in Didi Romi, Dirbis Massimi, Temka, Jikia Street, and Mitsubishi Street. Raja-based restaurant Elene has expanded and opened a new branch in the village of Tsesi on September 20. The restaurant's founder, Nino Karaselidze, shared the news on BMG TV's Women's Narrative. Known for its authentic local cuisine, Elene first opened in Ambrolauri and quickly gained popularity among both locals and tourists. According to Karaselidze, the decision to expand was prompted by the restaurant's steady growth and high demand. For 5 years, I was unable to accommodate all the guests. The demand grew every year. The new facility is much larger and interesting space, which is a logical stage of development for Elene, she said. The new branch features an expanded menu that includes traditional Racha dishes and widespread selection, highlighting the region's unique baking traditions. The expansion was made possible through the EU-funded grant program New Life for All Georgia, which supported the investment needed for the project. Currently, 7 women are employed at the new facility, which can host around 50 guests at a time. The restaurant has already welcomed tourist groups of 35 visitors. Karaselidze believes that if Racha continues developing as winter destination, the region's tourist potential and local business opportunities will grow even further. Georgia is seeing a surge in demand for event planning services, particularly from Asia market. According to Tiko Sikharulidze, founder of Incendio Events, the company established earlier this year by sisters Ketevan and Tinatin, Sikharulidze reports that foreign clients are increasingly choosing Georgia as destination for weddings or other special occasions. Sikharulidze notes that visa-free regime has played a key role in attracting more international customers. Demand has increased, especially for Chinese market. They are actively interested in organizing weddings, engagement ceremonies, and small-scale events, said Sikharulidze in an interview with BNDG. I believe that by this time next year, the number of foreign clients will surpass that of local ones. Currently, around 70% of companies' customers are local, while 30% are international visitors. Although Incendio Events is a new brand, its founders bring over 8 years of experience in the event planning industry. Sikharulidze emphasized that consumer attitudes have shifted significantly after the pandemic, with people placing greater value on shared experience and quality time. Clients now prefer meaningful, memorable gatherings. This change is driving the growing demand from professional event planning, she noted. In terms of pricing, Sikharulidze explained that costs vary based on the clients' need and preferences. On average, engagement ceremonies start from 3,000 lari, which includes live music, buffet, and organizational services. Meanwhile, the minimum cost of wedding ranges from 10,000 to 15,000 lari, covering full-scale planning and design for elegant, tasteful events. Hotel Altihad is entering a new phase of development, which plans to expand its infrastructure and ecosystem at an altitude of 3,000 meters with an investment of over 500,000 euro. Founder of the hotel, Nicholas Alavidze, told BMDG that the project aims to improve the alpine experience while maintaining harmony with the natural environment. We are expanding Altihad infrastructure and ecosystem on the territory we own. Using ecological, modern, and natural materials, we aim to create unique architectural masterpiece in full harmony with the environment. Our goal is for this place to become a global example of modern Georgian architecture and Georgian-Swiss cooperation, he said. As part of this new phase, 5 small hotel-type cottages, each 50 square meters, will be added to the facility to accommodate families and small groups. The cottages feature an exterior made of fiber concept that blends naturally with the mountains, while the interiors use natural wood tones to provide warmth and simplicity. Alavidze emphasized that Altihad mission has always been to improve safety standards in alpine zone, and the expansion project continues this focus. By combining modern architecture with environment, Altihad seeks to offer both safe and unforgettable alpine experience for visitors. Nini Chkheidze, co-founder of the family winery Simonica, located in the village of Meore Ochba, Baghdadi district, says that participation in international exhibitions remains one of the most serious challenges for small entrepreneurs. As Chkheidze noted with BMG TV, despite the fact that state helps winemakers in financing marketing activities on international markets, the cost of participation in some exhibitions is so high that small wineries simply cannot afford it. The main challenge is to become part of the civilized wine world. Georgian wine must be more recognizable on international market. If it's important that small wineries are also given more opportunities to participate in international exhibitions. Despite the support, some exhibitions are so expensive that only large companies can go there, the winemaker said. According to her, the global wine industry today is focused on small natural production, and Georgia should follow this trend. We must realize that quality starts with grapes. Quality grapes gives us quality wine. It's necessary to produce a healthy product with an organic approach. This is the way in which Georgia will take its special place in the wine world, said Nino Chkheidze. Ethno village Sisatura, located in Samegrelo, has assessed 2025 summer tourist season as below the average, reporting a 70% decline year-on-year, according to the founder Marika Todua. Despite strong activities in June and September, July and August recorded particularly low occupancy rates. Such a low load was not seen even in 2023. Todua told BMG, noting that changing tourist behavior played a key role. Unlike previous year, when visitors booked several months in advance, most reservations in 2025 were made in the last minute, often just weeks or even days before arrival. According to Todua, the number of European tourists, especially from Germany, fell sharply during the first half of the season. However, an increase in various from Asia countries we observed, including South Korea, Japan, helped particularly offset the decline. Despite the summer slowdown, September performed strongly, while October is processing with an average load. Overall, the facility's 2025 revenues are 10% higher than in 2023, though still lower than last year's record figures. If direct flights from Abu Dhabi to Georgia are not restored, the tourist sector could face serious financial challenges, warns Lasha Berekashvili, founder of travel company Travel to Georgia. In an interview with BMG, he said that the absence of this route would force tourist business to significantly reduce prices in order to cover their expenses. According to Berekashvili, tourists arriving from Gulf countries make up a significant share of their clients, around 30% during the summer and up to 70% in the winter season. These visitors mainly arrive via Abu Dhabi flight, making its suspension especially damaging for tourist companies. If enough rooms are not sold and tours are not booked, we will no longer have the resources to lower prices. Eventually, rates will drop to a level where we can only cover expenses, and beyond that, facilities will go bankrupt and close, he explained. The company founder rejected claims that the decline in tourist numbers is linked to a deterioration in service quality. If we compare rating on Booking.com, TripAdvisor or Airbnb, we'll see that the rating have remained consistent with the period when demand was high. This clearly shows that the problem lies not in quality but in decrease of tourist flows, said Berekashvili. He added that price adjustments have already begun across the sector. The average hotel room price has dropped from 160 lari to 130 lari, while tour packages that previously cost over 400 USD are now being sold for around 300 USD. According to him, if Abu Dhabi flight is not restored soon, the impact on Georgia's tourist industry could deepen in the coming months.
So that's all for today. We will meet next Sunday. Before that, of course, and for sure, stay tuned to BMG. It's worth it.
The Checkpoint is presented by FARA, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. FARA, to serve those who need it most.